Welcome back to Man the Helm podcast. Today I am joined by Ryan Liatsis. How's it going, sir?
It's pretty good. Doing all right over here.
Well, that's good, man. So I like to be as transparent as possible. I started this podcast to kind of get back into the world of gear, musicians, stuff like that. I was out of it for quite a while. And it was probably, it's been a little while. Your Instagram reels always just like were awesome. Every time it popped up on my Instagram feed, I was like, oh, sweet. And to be fair, that's the thing with musicians is you're only getting 60 seconds with those and they're awesome. But to be fair with that, I don't really know a whole lot about you just besides what I've seen you post on Instagram and stuff like that. So maybe we can start, if you want to get embryonic, we can get embryonic, but maybe where you started
Oh yeah.
and, what made you want to get into music and all that. And we can just kind of go from there if that's cool with you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It all kind of began. I think I was 14 when I started playing guitar, and kind of like unbeknownst to me, my most of my family was musical, but
Okay.
they, like my dad and his brothers had a band together in the 70s and stuff. But I didn't really know that stuff at that time, and I learned that. A bunch of people in our family were musicians. Um, but for me, it was like, I had a friend who played guitar, and I told my dad one day, and he was like, "Oh, I'll bring you home my old bass." He had his old bass in the city somewhere, and we lived up in upstate Rockland County in New York at that
Okay.
time. And so he went to the city, picked up his bass, brought it to me, and I was, like I said, I was about 14, and went over to my buddy's house, and I was like, "Hey, my dad gave me his bass. Now we can jam together, and I'll, figure out how to do this." And we both kind of like taught ourselves. And then I think he started taking lessons, and I started taking lessons at the same place, and um, so it kind of snowballed from there. So uh, I owe a lot to that buddy of mine. His name was Keith, and his dad played as well. So his dad kind of showed him stuff. My dad didn't really show me anything. I just kind of noodled around and
Right.
hoped for the best. But I originally, I played bass for like the first 6 months, if you want to say that,
Okay.
of my, when I was a teenager.
Hmm.
And then from there, my cousin, who was one of my uncle's, son, uh, he decided he wanted to start playing guitar. So me and him started playing guitar together. We went to the same music teacher in Rockland County, a guy named Marty Soleil. And that's kind of where things took off in like a direction of like, oh, I think I want to like really get into this. And he was teaching me things that were way beyond what I needed to know as like a 16 or 17-year-old
For sure.
trying to learn. And so that just having the family thing, I had a band with my cousin for a couple of years in high school, and a good buddy of mine who lived down the street was the bass player, and we kind of formed this band in high school, and we got kind of went our separate ways in college, except me and the bass player stayed together, and we started a new group, which was called Schwiz. So that was like my first real band that kind of tried to tour and do the whole thing. We were in kind of like the jam band world,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
doing that, we did that for a long while. Um, and in my mid 20s, I'm gonna say, like shortly after college, through college I played, but I didn't really play. I didn't go to college for music or anything, and I just kind of played for fun and practiced often and
Hmm.
whatever. Uh, but after college, I started to take it, more seriously, and I studied with a guy named Steve Kahn, who is like a pretty well-known jazz fusion world guitar player,
Okay.
but he's on a bunch of like Steely Dan recordings
Oh,
and
yeah.
Billy
Yep.
Joel. He's the guitarist on The Stranger by Billy Joel.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so so that was pretty cool to link up with him, and that's when I really took it to the next level of playing. And I was like, all right, I want to try to do this for real and learn all the things I can, and so that was kind of like my beginnings from like age 14 to like 24, we'll say something like
Okay.
that.
What were you kind of like? What was your musical diet consisting of in those early formative teenage years?
Oh yeah, the teenage years was all like hard rock. I was very classic rock. I loved Slash. Slash still is one of my favorite guitar players.
For
just
sure.
such
For
amazing
sure.
tone and licks, and the fact that he was so young when he was doing all that stuff still boggles my mind, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so big time into that classic rock. I mean, I just loved, you know, this was before obviously Instagram and Spotify and all that,
Yeah.
and I just listened to Q1043 like all day long, and I would. You know, luckily we had computers at least and the internet at that time, so I was able to find tabs and
Yeah. Yeah.
or record things on my tape player or get the CD and try to learn them. Um, so that was a big for me. Definitely like I was definitely into the rock, and then I slowly got in. You know, some friends exposed me to like the more progressive stuff, like Dream Theater and some of that harder edge, like Opeth and stuff like that. Anything that had
Okay.
a
Yeah.
guitar in it, I mean, I was kind of like interested in, you know.
Yeah. For sure.
So I would say it was mostly hard rock, classic rock, and kind of that progressive metal kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's kind of funny how everything kind of is melded together. I mean, I teach at a local mom and pop shop, and man, that's one of the first things I give my students is like, dude, there's only 12 notes, man.
Yeah,
You know, it's the same
yeah.
12 notes that Mozart used, is the same 12 that Eddie Van Halen used, man. So, you
That's
know, and it's just it's a practical application of how we utilize these. That's all it is, man. It's
that's
nothing
so
different.
true. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So when did I've recently I've talked to a handful of guys that were really influenced by the fusion stuff and the jazz stuff. That's so outside of my wheelhouse, though. I've been kind of trying to dabble into it here and there.
Hmm.
What was kind of like? I'm assuming your teacher that's really when you kind of started getting really serious into it, and that was 20, the 20 years
Yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of what set you on that path. So can you walk through like kind of how you progressed from? Because I think every kid growing up, we kind of all seem to have similar backgrounds of what we start liking, and then it kind of branches off from there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what were some of the things? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your question.
No, no, I was just saying what was some of those earlier more jazz fusion sort of influences that you started kind of getting hip to?
Sure. Yeah. I would say I don't know if this is my first experience with jazz, although I played for a brief time, basically like half a year in high school, my senior year. I played in the jazz band, and that's
Okay,
where I maybe had my first experience with quote unquote jazz, even though we weren't really, you know, we were a high school marching slash jazz band playing at the football games. So it's like,
right,
you know, we
right.
were, you know, but that was where I discovered like Weather Report, like we played
Oh,
Birdland
okay. Yeah, yeah.
and some other things like that. We just had some blues and stuff like that. So that was kind of like my first experience with jazz, I would say, music. And then another big thing that happened in my senior year of high school is that an uncle of mine gave me a Frank Zappa CD. So
Nice.
Zappa totally opened my world to like some other like I was like, wow, I've never heard anything like this before. I mean, this is incredible, you know. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
mostly instrumental album that he gave me, um,
Okay.
which I was into. So I'd say those two kind of things. And then I think when I was in college, a buddy of mine who's the drummer of my trio, this guy Mike, I think me and him, I'm not sure if he introduced it to me, but me and him, I remember we just loved this guy Chick Corea, who's an amazing
Yep.
piano player, keyboard player, Return to Forever, and all that stuff. So I would say those three bands, like Weather Report, Zappa, Chick Corea, were kind of like mind blowing experiences when I discovered them, and led
Mm-hmm.
me to discover, you know, all the kind of offshoots of those people, you know, because Weather Report was basically a super group of jazz fusion musicians like Jocko and Joe Zawinul and Wayne Shorter, of course. And Zappa had so many people that he played with, all the famous drummers,
Right.
Terry Bozzio and all those Chad Wackerman and all that stuff. Uh, and Chick Corea, of course, too. Also, tons of great players that he's played with. And one of my favorite guitar players, Frank Gambale, is another fusion guitar player. He became a pretty big influence for me as well. So,
Nice. Okay. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm assuming at that point in time, it kind of, I know I've had these periods of guitar playing where like I dive super deep into like a specific genre, or possibly even sub that down to a specific artist, and just really dive into their
mm,
catalog,
yep.
just to try to get as much of that proverbial stand on the shoulders of the giants, ideas and the way
Yep.
they play and phrasing and stuff like that. Because that's always the thing that's really blown me away is when I discover a new artist or something that I was thinking I didn't want to listen to. I find all these really interesting ideas that just start coming out from my own creative side of things. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That's one of the things
Yep.
that I don't like when it's mostly some of my, and I might be generalizing here, so I'd apologize, but it's mostly some of my younger students. They are like, well, I only like this, and I know that's a symptom of age as well. But it's like, dude, like you need to look at what like insert favorite whoever, see who their influences were, and then see who their influences were, and then see who their, you know what I mean, and just kind of go down that rabbit hole because you're gonna eventually get back to something really, really awesome where you just have this culmination of style, tones, skill levels, and different techniques that you can utilize.
Yep. Exactly.
So when you started teaching, or when you started going, I'm so sorry. What was the name of that teacher that really kind of put a fire
Oh,
under you?
Steve Kahn. Steve
Steve Kahn.
Kahn was his
Yeah.
name.
So when you started, working or getting lessons from him, like was there ever like a moment where you realized like, yep, this is definitely what I want to do, or was it kind of like a slow burn sort of thing?
No, I would say that I definitely knew music was what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew when I early on when I maybe not when I first picked up the instrument, but I have a distinct memory where I like was on a vacation, a family vacation, and I remember seeing this group of I think we were in San Francisco, and there was like a group of people just busking out on the street, and like they
Mm-hmm.
were just having the time of their lives, and they were just playing some blues or something, and there was a lead guitar player who was like basically dressed in rags, and he's just smiling, having an awesome time, and I'm like, man, this is like I don't even care if I wind up doing this. This just seems like so much fun, and that's what I want to do. So I would say that I knew before Steve Kahn that I wanted to
Okay.
pursue music, and then once I was in those early 20s, I was like, all right, I want to try to make a living and a profession out of this, not just
Right.
like play as a hobby, um, which is fine too.
Yeah.
So and he was also a very like. He was a good teacher, but he wasn't like a hard ass kind of teacher. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Which was
Yeah.
cool,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was like he looked at me as like a paying customer. So it was like he wanted to give me whatever I was interested in. He didn't necessarily say like here's the regimen, here's what we do, here's the one you should practice, it was more like studious, like a college level kind of thing of like I could only get out of him what I brought to the table. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which
Yeah.
which is good in a way. It's like I had to form my own opinions on things, which is
Hmm.
important. Um,
Yeah.
so that was that part of the learning, and that's I kind of teach that way too. When I teach people, it's very much like you know, well, you ask the questions. It's not up to me to ask you all the questions. Like I want to know what you want to know. Uh, so I would say that was definitely a very good part of learning, and that it was a lot of self discipline. I just had like I would say I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna at the time of living at home in my basement I had a little setup and I said I'm just gonna every day at least 2 hours down there and just as often as I could around my work schedule and all the other things I had going on and I just committed. That was mostly it. So
Yeah. Well, I don't think I don't think it was like I've talked to other people about this too, and it's like guitar players or musicians in general, like that's who they are, and that's what they want to be doing. Even if they have the typical 9 to 5, like you're gonna find them. Like I know me, I'm sitting on my couch watching TV with a guitar in my lap most of the night. You know what I mean? If I'm not
yep.
actively practicing or playing or recording or doing something or practicing for a gig or whatever, that I mean, I'm always got a guitar in my hand. So it's one of those things where I don't like to say it's a disciplined thing because it's something that you really want to do. And like you said, I like what you said. It's a self-discipline thing. You want to do it, so then you're going to dedicate the time to go do it.
Exactly.
It
Exactly.
doesn't need to be some, hey, take your medicine right now, and we're going to go ahead and just you know knock out whatever exercise that is the page 2
Sure.
Melbay whatever. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So
although I'll say that the discipline, like you said, I would, you know, back then when I had the time, I mean, I would try to play 4, 5, 6 hours if I could a day.
for
But
sure.
the discipline is really not, again, I do the same thing. I sit on the couch, I watch TV, I play guitar, and it's just fun. I'm just playing licks or noodling around. So the discipline, I
Yeah.
think, is in like, really sitting down and saying like, I need to focus on this one thing and really working at that. And that was actually a really a good method in retrospect when I look back at it. Is not like overwhelming yourself, and I feel a lot of students sometimes do that uh, that I've taught, where it's like they just want to learn a million things, and it's like, all right, let's just focus on this one area. So that's what I would do. I would say like, you know what, I'm just, and even broken down inside of that, like I want to focus on playing really good chords on the top four strings, right? The D, G, B, and E string. Like I want to be able to visualize those voicing. Let me just pick one or two max, and I'm just going to practice those two and be able to play them in all keys and be able to grab that shape till it's muscle memory, and I would do that. Like that was a great exercise. I would just work on like two voicings until I
Hmm.
could play them in every key and I could just grab them out of nowhere basically. That was kind of a decent method, at least for me. And it's always subjective, of course. People learn in different ways. Some people are very quick at picking stuff up, and others it could take them years. You know what I mean? So,
For sure.
but
Yeah.
I thought that was a very looking back at it to where I am now, I think that was probably the one of the faster ways that I could have gotten to where I am. So I
Well,
thought that
man,
was pretty cool.
yeah, for sure. I've had this. One of my current favorite guitar players is Andy Wood, and
Yep.
I was sitting and watching one of his lessons online or something the other day, and it's something that's hit with me pretty hard. It's like, dude, if you want to be better at this or you want to be better at that, insert whatever technique. What are you listening to that utilizes that? You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be better at alternate picking, listen to somebody that utilizes alternate picking. If you want to be better at unique chord voicings, listen to people that use unique chord voicings. Like, that should be like, you shouldn't have to sit and just Google stuff, because that's not like, in my opinion, that's not a good way to retain the knowledge. Like you said, is picking something really simple that you can move around through all 12 keys and really focus just on those handful of things and really drill it in. That
Yep.
way, you said, like, when you're sitting improvising or you're playing with a band or you're just recording or doing whatever, it's muscle memory at that point. That at that point, it's like, oh yeah, yeah. It's like you don't even think about it anymore, because you've just
Exactly.
drilled it so
Exactly.
much. So
Yep. And that's where you want to get. And that was like a Schofield thing. I think I remember reading or hearing where
hmm
it's just like he's just not you know not thinking is the best place to be. Not being as relaxed as you can and not just again the muscle. It's a combination of things. It's muscle memory. It's knowledge to some extent of theory and stuff like that, and experience. Just the
yeah,
experience of playing with a band, creating music with others. So all three of those things, I think, are what you can learn from and become better. And it's never ending, because there's always new people to play with, and there's always new techniques to learn, and there's always new genres to explore and all that. So
oh yeah, yeah. Well, you probably know this much better than I do, but in this day and age, and it's been this way for a while, you can't be just a guitar player. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have some other
I
stuff.
know.
Yeah, you gotta have a solid skill set of a lot of things and wear many hats in order to, like you said, be successful and actually make a living. Being a
hmm
quote unquote musician. So, what are some other things that you kind of started to get into besides just being a guitar player?
Yeah. So the main thing that kind of I got let's what's the right word? I don't want to say I got roped into or dragged into, but
Okay.
I just kind of like eventually went this way. I was always interested in it, but the tech side, the
hmm
engineering and stuff like that. So when I was younger, like I mentioned, my dad gave me his bass, but my dad was also in the AV industry, so he was like a
Oh,
salesperson
cool. Yeah.
who worked in the AV world, and he would, once I started getting into music, he would like bring home a mixing board for me. He'd be like, "Hey, this is, this one fell off the back of the truck, and we can keep it here for a couple months or whatever, and if you want to use it, we can, we'll make it. So he helped me make a little recording setup at his place, which was basically an old analog Mackie mixer with this thing called the Tascam DA88, which was a digital tape recorder
Oh, okay.
from
Yep.
the late 80s, early 90s, I think. And so that was pretty cool that I was just always into that. And my dad's house was like the recording space for our high school band and all that. So and so through that and through him, I kind of learned about just simple things like here's how a basic mixer works, and here's how to use this tape recorder, and here's an XLR cable, and here's a couple microphones to mess around with. So once I got to my college years, then I was like, all right, well now there's areas here at this school that I can learn about this stuff. There was like radio production courses and stuff like that. So I kind of got into that zone and took all the production and TV classes and all that stuff that I could take. And it wasn't until kind of later that, after college, I was like, yeah, I want to really do the music thing. So I taught lessons basically full time. And then a job opportunity with the tech thing came up. And I was basically an audiobook editor for audible.com,
Oh,
which
cool.
taught me how to use Pro Tools and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool to, I learned that aspect from that. And then after that, I got a job at a production rental house. So it was, dealing with, again, mixers, microphones, wireless gear, all types of audio things. And I was just an audio tech. So that's where it really shot up my knowledge, that I got this gig at that place. And it was a really cool experience. Wasn't my favorite job by far because there's a lot of like nonsense that goes on in the TV production world.
I can imagine.
So, but it was fun and it was extremely helpful learning wise. And after that, my next biggest gig was basically being an engineer for live sound. I worked at this place called Brooklyn Bowl up here in Brooklyn. So
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
a front of house engineer there, and that's where I learned at the TV rental house. I learned all the techie stuff, but I wasn't really working any gigs. I was just in the warehouse,
Right.
testing gear, putting together packages for people, and then I got to put all that stuff into the field when I started getting into live sound. So I did that, and that slowly transitioned into the production stuff. So when I was about 30, I think I was 30. I moved into a house with with my girlfriend and a couple roommates, all musicians, and we had a full-blown music studio in our backyard. Like it was a detached barn that
Right.
was
Yeah.
like it was made into a music studio like in the 90s, I think the landlord said. And so we set it up, like I invested in, all that stuff, got nice gear and speakers and all the mics and all that stuff. Bought a drum set. So that's when I really learned, the production stuff. But really it's, a lot of self-taught kind of stuff. I mean, that's been me my whole life, is just, picking up tidbits of knowledge from other people. So like I said, it's just been like this long journey of engineering and stuff like that. But I've done all types of odd jobs. Like I've done like voiceover work, and I've done scoring work, which I do currently, and just all types of other things. I'll still work for my dad occasionally. He does he's involved with the AV world still.
Okay. Cool.
And just any type of creative kind of gigs that I can get my hands on, I'll pretty much jump at it. And that's a way to
Absolutely.
make a living. You got to do. And to me, I always thought, it's been a balance of like, I never have been one of those 9 to 5 type of people, and
Sure.
so, but it's it's a catch-22 in a way. It's like you give up the stability and all that stuff for the freedom, but then you don't have the steady paycheck and all that. So it is like a balance of stuff, and in the last couple of years I've been very lucky that I think I've figured out at least what works for me right now, and it's usually I can sustain myself for most of the year, and the winter months up here in New York get a little slow. So you got to
Sure.
save up your chestnuts for December, January, and February. But but
For
yeah,
sure.
so just all types of gigs, but mostly on the engineering, techie kind of side is where I've been. So
Well, and that's what I like to relay that to, people in the audience and stuff like that is, you know, a lot of the younger students I have, they have this idea of the only way to be a musician is to be the guy on stage. You know what I mean? Is to be the
Mm.
person that's playing the gig and looking cool with their hair blowing back in the wind and all that stuff. But there are there's so many awesome jobs outside of just playing a show that can sustain you so much better than trying to be in a touring band. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from doing that if that's what you want to do, but man, there's so much easier things to make money in this sort of industry than being the guy on stage. Most of the people that I've met that are really really hardcore touring musicians love the touring for the 45 minutes to 2 hours they're on stage, and the rest of the day kind of sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's what I learned from I did tour a lot with my first band Schwiz, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
We bought a van and did the thing and
Yep.
traveled across the country, and it was a great experience, and I don't regret it because at that age that I was in my young 20s, it was perfect. I didn't
Sure.
care too much
Absolutely.
about making money or sleeping in my bed and all that. And
Yeah.
but yeah, it's hard. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's those couple hours on stage, and almost every other minute is it's a lot. It's fun, but it's also extremely draining and tiring, and mixed with if you have clashing personalities, which luckily we mostly didn't, but either way, you're stuck in a van with four people forever, and
Yeah.
not everything's going to be agreed upon when you're in a
For
band. You're
sure.
making decisions for the band, and you're making financial decisions for everyone and stuff like that. So, you know, it comes with its ups and downs, of course. But yeah, I mean, the touring thing, it's both. It's got its ups and its downs, and I'm always of the mindset of like, yeah, if you also have to think about what is your goal. If your goal is to be uh, just any guitar player, just off in the background, but you're making a living. I mean, you can do that. You can do that
Yeah.
thing. And the
Hmm.
guitar. I don't know if you know the guitarist Greg Howe, but he's like a
Yeah.
fusion guitar player.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
remember his listening to an interview of his, and it was like, he got a gig playing with Michael Jackson. He played with Michael Jackson for a couple of years, and when he was asked like, why did you give that up or whatever, because he only did it for a little while, and he gave it up, and he was like, well, yeah, the money is awesome, but I'm just ex guitar player when I play with Michael Jackson. I'm just off
Right.
in the background. I get a couple moments to shred, but nobody knows I'm Greg Howe. And I
Right.
left because I wanted to be Greg Howe, and I wanted to go play in India and play in all these cool European cities that love jazz fusion music, and in that realm, and be known as Greg Howe, the guitar player. And I always resonated with that. Like it might take longer and it might be more difficult, but it's more rewarding to me if you can make, if that's the thing you want to do, if you want to make a name for yourself. And there are all types of different people and personalities that works with. So I've always
Yeah.
resonated more with that. Like I'm just trying to be more of a personality, which is, again, why you found me on Instagram and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I didn't really do that stuff before. And eventually I reached a point where I was like, all right, well, I'm in my mid 30s, and I want to start getting myself out there, and I've had some fun doing these other things, but I think I want to try to do this thing, and build a name and build a career out of that. Um, which, of course, as we mentioned, is extremely difficult. But that type of mentality always resonated with me. And the older I get, the less I want that gig. Like, the big recent one was the Smashing Pumpkins were looking for a guitar player. Right, that was like a couple months ago. I think everybody knew
Yep.
about that one. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, man, that sounds fun. And then I thought about it for a while, and I was like, I don't think that's for me, though. It's just, I'm just going to be behind Billy Corrigan, and that's that. So, uh,
Yeah.
I'd rather take that path less traveled, I guess, of trying to do it on my own sort of thing.
For sure. Well, and like you said, the end goal is really, if that's your end goal, is to be the session guy or the background guy or whatever, is that what you want to do? it's not extremely difficult. You got to move to somewhere where it's a music city,
Yeah,
and
exactly,
just
exactly.
start going out and meeting people, going to writers' nights, going to open jams, playing some fill-in gigs where you're not going to get paid hardly anything at all, barely even enough to pay for
Yep.
parking, and that's the way it's going to be. But I do like what you said about the social media side of things, because now is like the best time to put yourself out there. I think people have this idea though that it's still like it's oversaturated. But my
Mm.
argument to that every time when it comes to just musicians in general on social media is if you looked at just like the population of the United States, and listeners, I'm sorry, I know I've said this a million times, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's true. If you look at the population of the United States and look at how many people play an instrument, it's a pretty staggering difference of people that actually play an instrument versus people that just live in the United States. Then you take those people
Mm.
that play an instrument that are actually trying to do something with that instrument, that number drops off significantly again. So, yes, it might seem oversaturated just because that's the media you're consuming if you're in that world online, but nobody's seen you do it before. That's always been the mindset. If that is what you want to do, nobody has seen you do it. And it's an easy networking tool. This is how I get every guest for this podcast. This is how that is the reason why you and I are talking right now,
Yeah,
Ryan.
yeah. Yep,
It's
exactly.
the easiest networking tool. You can directly message whoever you'd like. Now, you got to be a little realistic, if you're trying to message Billy Corgan, for instance, with the Smashing Pumpkins thing, you're probably
Of
not going to
course.
get a reply back, but that's the thing. It's like if you want to connect with musicians, dude, it's like this is the perfect time to be alive right now.
Yeah, it's very true. And just like everything, it's I always compare it to like Amazon and stuff like it's like is it all these big entities, they're always gonna come with their pluses and minuses, and it's always a
Hmm.
question of do the pluses outweigh the minuses, and because there's a lot of nonsense out there on social media, and
For
there's a
sure.
lot of uh, you know things that affect people. Like people can get serious depression, and I feel bad for like the high school kids and stuff these days dealing with all like I could never imagine that being when I was in high school that age having a
Absolutely.
phone and having social media. So I definitely resonate with that a little bit and feel for the younger generation. But there's so much good stuff that comes out of it too. So it's like how do you and that's there's no real answer. It's just up to however you personally feel about it. Um,
Right.
but one of the major benefits, absolutely. I mean, meeting new musicians and the music industry. I think a lot of people also kind of complain about the Spotify and the this and the that and the Instagram. And, it's I understand the complaints and yeah, but I don't necessarily think that it was much easier back in the
No.
90s or the 70s or the what I mean. So I think a lot of
Yeah.
people get ahead of themselves like, oh well, the good old days are gone. And yeah, the money thing is gone. You can't make as much money off of selling records anymore. But what are you going to do? You can either sit there and sulk about it, or you can adapt to the times and try to stay afloat. So I'm opting to do that, and uh, and you got to play the game to some extent,
For
But
sure.
I've been very lucky, and I found success on Instagram just basically sharing knowledge, and that was a big thing
Hmm.
that my girlfriend had. Uh, she said that she heard somebody say that, and I was like, that's a good idea. I should and people had said in the past like, oh, you should throw up lesson videos, or you should just throw up whatever you can, and yeah, so I did like a couple in the very beginning, and the couple took off, and I was like, wow, this might actually be a way to reach people, and sure enough, the giving the lessons thing, and I love it too. I mean, I love spreading the knowledge, and I think that's one of my favorite things to do is share that knowledge and teach people that are interested in this stuff. I'm not necessarily
For sure.
interested in like teaching a 5-year old kid how to play ukulele or something like that, but
Absolutely.
uh, but I am interested in showing people that are interested in these weird guitar things, that as interested as I am, and that made me feel very validated because it's hard, I'm just like, what am I any different than any other artist out there or guitar player or whatever, but I have one thing that makes me very different, which is the mustache, of course.
Hey.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Folks listening on the podcast, you should head over to YouTube right now and check out this Gloria Zappa stash we got going on right now.
There you go. There you go. Yep.
Well, but see that's the thing, and I like to reinforce this too with the audience that I have and my students and whatnot. Is kind of like what I was talking about earlier with, you can't just be a guitar player. You know what I mean? And the same goes for
Yep.
online. Like you can't just shred online. Like don't get me wrong, people will think it's cool, but it's going to get real old real quick. You have to have some sort of value you're providing to the people consuming that content. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
knowledge is the easiest value to add. It's like, hey, there's been plenty of people that I've watched where they've shown me just breakdowns of things that I already knew, but it was a different approach, and now I have this completely different
Exactly.
mindset. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? So
Yep.
it's a wealth of knowledge that, and once again, I say this over and over again, whether it's something like you're just demoing gear, you've never demoed that gear for YouTube, or you've never taught that lesson for Instagram, or like, I understand it might sound stupid, but at the end of the day, someone is going to see something from you that is, it clicks with them, and they're just going to be like, oh, wow, I
Yeah.
never thought of
Yeah.
it that way, you know? And like you
Exactly.
said, you're
I
going to
find that to
start
be.
building an audience.
Yep. That's the best way to put it. I mean, it's all the knowledge is already out there, and on a deeper, metaphysical level, it's like all the knowledge is really out there already. We're not anyone,
Sure.
everyone, every musician is not doing anything that hasn't been quote unquote done already or doesn't exist already. As you mentioned, the 12 notes, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's all about that. What is this person's view of it? What is that person's view of it? And there's a large amount of people and musicians that have different opinions and views on things. And you're absolutely right. That's the best way to learn. I mean, even before we just sat down here, I just was, I had a couple minutes and I was just looking at YouTube, and a Rick Beato video came up, and I was just like, oh, I
Hmm.
never, he was interviewing Pat Metheny, and I don't know much about Pat Metheny. I do, and I've enjoyed his music, but I never really dove deep into him. And it was the same deal, just a quick clip that I saw, and I was just like, wow, like that's an interesting takeaway that I just learned from that one 30-second little tidbit of hearing Pat Metheny talk about a little measure of his music.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's really never, like I said, it's never ending, and I think you just got to be open to that, and open to receiving the knowledge, and searching for the knowledge. I mean, that's the coolest thing, is that you can, all this knowledge is out there, and you just kind of have to find it, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing on your instrument too, man. Or learning a new aspect of. I mean, to go back to the production side of it, a new aspect of recording that you never thought of before to make something sound a little bit
mm,
better, or make your workflow a
yep,
little bit better. It's one of those like one of my another guitar player that I got really into in the early 2010s, I believe, was Danny Rabin from Marvin. They put out a couple
cool,
music videos of them just jamming, and I was like, "Oh, dude, I've got to," and it's awesome because I've gotten to see the progress of that band and just Danny in general online, over the past what, I mean, heck, it's probably been almost a decade now,
oh yeah,
of just being
yep,
able to
yeah,
see
they've been
him.
around,
Yeah, yeah. And but once again, it was one of those things where it was something that I would have never gone actively searching for. I guess the algorithm just showed it to me, out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, here we
yep,
go, deep dive."
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I do that too. I still do that as well. It's like I see someone or hear someone, and it's it's cool because we're now able to set ourselves up to present whatever we want to present to the world in that
hmm
fashion. So it's like, you can click on my page or my YouTube page, and I've put up there what I want you to see of me, you know what I mean? And you've put up
right,
there what you want me to see of you. So it is very cool, and it's in a way, it's we've been liberated as musicians because of the record industry crumbling and Spotify and all that stuff. So yes, it's not as glorious. You can't go sit down in a session and record a hit for 8 hours and make millions of dollars, but you can also do whatever the hell you want and present yourself to the world however the hell you want these
yeah,
days. So it's and you don't have to listen to managerial types and record labels and all that stuff. So in a way, it's I think it's pretty cool, a pretty cool time, and like we said, you just got to use the internet and use your whatever your reach is, use it for good and use it for things that you're passionate about.
For sure. Well, and as far as like the hit songwriting goes, I mean, pretty much people just have to buy. I mean, MacBooks come with GarageBand on it. I mean, I know that's a very basic, DAW, but I mean, you can create music with a, a super small, two channel interface and, any kind of DAW that you can download or anything that comes on a computer stock these days. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you can literally start creating music. And I think there is a double edged sword to that because now I was talking to a student of mine a few weeks ago about this. He was asking why a lot of bands kind of are starting to sound like similar in some aspects. And I said, well, it's partly because of what you're consuming, but it's also the music that you're consuming. They're using a lot of these VSTs, a lot of these popular plugins, a lot of these popular
Yeah,
drum
sure.
samples. You know what I mean? So there's going to be similarity across the board, regardless of how you EQ mixed, etc. That it's going to start to kind of sound like that. And I think that's kind of a symptom of it. It's good that people can sit down in their bedroom and make music and put it out to the world. But I think there gets to be a certain level of complacency that happens when it's just kind of like, oh, yep, these drums sound good enough. You know what I mean? Or, yep, that guitar sound,
Sure,
that
yeah.
VSC, So it's not until you really dive deep into, that world, which I've just kind of dipped my toes in that water, and I'm quickly realizing that that's probably more challenging than learning the instrument itself with all the knowledge that you have to try to consume
Yeah,
to,
right.
to push
Yeah.
out. So what are some things that like kind of helped you out when you got onto more of the production side with maybe like workflow or now? I know it was kind of probably a combination of all the work you had prior as well into that,
Yeah.
but what are some of the ways that you kind of tried to, I guess what would be a good way to say it, level up move the needle a little bit every day in the right direction?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is literally what I've been doing since I got into the studio stuff, which, again,
Yeah.
I haven't at around the age of 30. I'm 37 now. So at 30, I moved into that place with the barn, with the studio in the backyard. And I would say that just that time of like, is when I really started to just do a lot of, again, I'm a self taught kind of person. So I had the engineering background from doing
Yeah.
live sound and stuff like that. But I didn't have a lot of the production side, and so just having that studio, it was like we had our own classroom in our backyard, and I would go out there every day, and I would just be watching YouTube videos or just recording. I was just like, I'm just gonna record a guitar today that's a meaningless, whatever noodle, and just work on getting a cool sound or whatever, or I'm just gonna play some drums just so I have some drum recordings, and I'm gonna practice mixing. You know what I mean? So I would
Mm-hmm.
just practice that kind of stuff, and I would watch videos, and as we said, it's kind of like there's endless videos out there and endless opinions on things. So I think what you have to do is just kind of find those certain people that are either like industry standard professionals, right? People that we all know, like Rick Rubin and stuff like that, and watch videos that they do and say, "Oh, I do this when I mix, and I do that when I mix."
Right.
But also people like you and I, and people that are not in the big public eye of the music scene per se, and just learn little tricks. I mean, that's what I would do. I would watch tons of little shorts and just see let's see what this person puts on their master chain in their DAW or whatever, and let's
Mm-hmm.
see what kind of microphone these people use on their drums or whatever, and that and having other musicians to bounce the ideas off of. My one roommate at the time, we were very he's like a producer type, so I was more of the engineer techie type, and he would just have
Mm-hmm.
the idea. He would be like, "Oh no, it should sound more like this. Make it sound like that," and then I would have to go to work and make it sound like that. And so
Right.
it was although it can be annoying, of course, to have one of those producer types breathing over your neck all the time, but it was a good experience to like learn how to
For
and
sure.
that's a big thing being an engineer. You have to translate people's like, oh, make it sound a little more like tingy, like or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and you have to translate that into some technical thing. Like, okay, so I need to EQ it over here in this zone, and I need to compress this part, and I need to put a little reverb on the. Um, So it was cool. So I would say that just again a lot of self teaching, just watching lots of videos and just experience points. I mean, that's all it is. It's and I also got very lucky with again I mentioned the scoring stuff, and I got a gig working for a buddy of mine who does like video game scoring, and I kind of got into that world, and I learned a lot
Nice.
from that, and also just from making my own albums and stuff, and like learning
Hmm.
about mastering and how does mastering work these days with the digital stuff, and now all this AI mastering stuff is coming out too, which is pretty awesome, and so like I said, it's a great time in terms of from an artistic view, because back in the 90s or when I was starting, it was like, you had to go to a studio, you had to pay an engineer,
Yep.
you had to pay the whole band, you had to pay everyone, pay. So much money had to be spent. And in fact, even in the early 2000s, it's like our band made one of our first albums, and we spent probably almost $10,000 just to make,
Yeah.
an album of 14, 15 songs or whatever. And now I can do it for free in my bedroom, and I can master it myself and put it out whenever I want. And so it's, so there's that good aspect of it that came for people like me that I just love writing songs, I love recording, and I just have endless ideas, and I'm just like, I got to get them all out. So for me, it's been a blessing that I can just do it now and not have to pay anyone. And so I really like that aspect.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like I'm the exact same way, man. Like I always have these like melody lines or something that'll be rolling around in my head, and it's so convenient now just to walk up here and be like, okay, noodle it out real quick, call it good, and then I'm gonna save this for later. Or it could inspire me to flush out an entire song, and next thing
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
30,
Yep.
45 minutes from now, I have a completed song that I didn't have 20, 30, 40
Yep.
minutes ago. You know what I mean? And I can send it out to people I play with, or I can send it out to whoever, and it's so convenient. One of the things that's kind of dangerous, but it's also a mindset that I've been kind of thinking about, and I hate to harp on him again, but once again, he's one of my favorite guys right now. Is Andy Wood, when he was recording his latest album, Charisma, his big go-to
Hmm.
was fix it in pre. So
Yep.
we're not gonna fix anything, or if it's not good enough in pre, we're not doing it. We gotta tweak some
Yep.
stuff. We gotta move some stuff around. We gotta do another or whatever. It's gonna be fixed in pre, and that's one of the biggest things. And I'm in Nashville. I love Telecasters. I always have loved Telecasters, but they're so bright. And one of the things, I don't know why I never thought of this. It happened a couple weeks ago. I just rolled my freaking tone knob down. Something so stupid that I never even thought to do, because you just never think about it. And now it's like, holy crap, this is now I can do a bunch of awesome stuff. I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
to go back
Yep.
and EQ a bunch of stuff and try to take this harshness away or anything. So it's been fantastic. Something so stupid that I'm kind of like just beating my head against the wall. But
Exactly right.
but it's like you said. I do like it. It's a trial by fire. It's a learning process. We have everything available to us. It's a great time to be. But and that's one of those things. I kind of came downstairs. I was talking to my wife. I was just like, man, I've been playing guitar for a hot minute now, and I never thought about this. Like I always would do volume stuff, especially live. But
Sure.
no, never even thought about it. Just didn't even cross my mind. Those are
Yeah,
just extra knobs,
I'm the same
you know.
way. I'm the same way. It's usually on 100%, and occasionally I'll remember to do it, and I'll say, "Oh, that sounds a lot better actually for what I'm
Right.
doing right now, at least." So
Yeah.
definitely
It,
understand that.
it was just one of those aha moments that should have been an aha moment like 20 years ago. But it is what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is. It is what it
Yep.
is. Well, we're getting close to time here. So before we wrap this up, where can everybody find you at?
Yeah, so Instagram is my, mostly where I'm posting these days. So it's just at Ryan.Liatsis, Liatsis. But I'm starting to build up my YouTube page and post more original stuff there too. So it's just same deal, Ryan.Liatsis, or just YouTube Ryan Liatsis, and I'm sure I'll pop up. So, I have two bands that I'm doing these days. One is my trio, which I started putting a bunch of stuff up on my YouTube page, and I'm going to drop some more things. And we just put out an album, kind of like jazz rock fusion kind of stuff.
Cool.
So we just dropped that earlier in October. Um, so Instagram, YouTube are mostly where I'm at, and I have a website that I update pretty regularly, ryanliatsis.com, and so those are mainly where you can find me. And then my other band called Western Skies is my other main kind of bread and butter, which is in that classic rock.
Okay.
Not really country, but there's a little twang to it.
Sure,
You
sure.
know, kind of classic rock. It's kind of like Fleetwood Mac mixed with like Rush and Boston and Crosby, Stills and Nash. You know, so those
Nice.
kind of influences.
Yeah.
Um, so those two bands are what I'm trying to push right now, and like I said, I have stuff up on the YouTube page to check out. So
Awesome. Well, hey guys, if you don't want to do all that searching, just go down to the show notes. Everything that Ryan just mentioned and much more will be down in the show notes. You can click those links and go check out everything that Ryan is up to these days. But Ryan, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I know it was a little funky on the schedule side of things for on both ends, but hey, such is life with musicians. Musicians and schedules are kind
exactly.
of kind of hard things sometimes. But no, we made it
Yep.
work,
Well, we
man.
made it happen.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I
Yep.
appreciate you taking the time, man.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you as well. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for thinking of me, and look forward to checking out more of your stuff and seeing what happens with all of our musical adventures. You know.
Absolutely. Well, for Ryan and for all of you guys, we will check you next week on Man the Helm podcast.